Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Lola Gershfeld. Lola to all of you. I'm an organizational psychologist and developer of the emotional connection process, or EMC. I'm grateful and excited to have you here and support you in experiencing resilience, connection, and productivity with your teams. Today we're going to talk about the science of creating secure attachment in team relationships. I feel that my book, Emotional Connection, is a good starting point for managers, HR managers, or L&D professionals to learn about the attachment and the significance of creating attachment in team relationships. I also created online courses for you to gain the skills and tools and the experience in learning how to repair relationships, increase employee engagement, and transform your company culture through emotional connection. These resources are your guide for resolving conflicts, addressing team dynamics, and igniting your team with motivation so that they can feel safe and you can feel safe and productive, and you can regain your balance to move forward and work cohesively together. I've written about the EMC process for several years now, and I really want you to know that you don't have to be stuck. You can learn the roadmap to thriving. I feel that this process is revolutionizing. It has revolutionized team relationships, and understanding the science of attachment really will help you transform and create environments where your people can really thrive. I've done a lot of research and used the EMC process with hundreds of cases, working with individuals, leaders, teams, managers, and organizations, and the results are excellent. And if you really understand the framework of attachment and what makes the relationship last, you will start to see your team interactions entirely differently, because our approach to diving in and seeing the significance of emotional connection is really missing in every other model that exists today. So I'm really excited that you are curious to see how this works. And what I have seen doesn't work when the issues of productivity, performance, and dynamics come up. When I was a young professional building teams and companies, I was really on fire. And I thought of myself being very confident. I thought I could deal with anything. I hired people, built teams, worked on all kinds of projects and challenges until I was asked to serve on this board. They had a lot of conflicts. And to my horror, I felt completely helpless. I thought, wait a minute, what is going on here? And then I realized that no one knew what was going on there. So as a young professional, you can imagine, I really wanted to find the answer. And of course, where did I go? I rushed to the bookstore. I found books on collusion and trust and holding people accountable, which was very convincing, but was not really working. Then I read books about teaching people communication skills and negotiation skills and giving people insights into their past, which didn't do much either. And then what I noticed with these board members was that they were all very skilled when they weren't talking to each other. And then when they did talk to each other, they couldn't use those skills because they were just so emotionally upset. Well, and I thought to myself, well, this is interesting. People are not really having fights. They look like they're having fights about strategy or what direction the company should go to, but they're really not. And so using the attachment framework, I started to really see the underlying issues, that they were having really fights about whether they feel valued or whether they feel seen and heard and whether they felt important. So that is what they were having fights about. So then I got into the whole thing, well, this is a mess because nobody understands emotions. and they had this notion that emotions don't belong in the workplace. Certainly, they didn't really correlate what was happening emotionally with them and what was happening in the boardroom. So I was caught mostly because it was just such a mystery to me. In my own professional career, I think, no one taught me the importance of emotions or emotional connection in the workplace. In a way, these board members and my experience with this distressed relationship played a huge part in my career and my professional development. It had really impacted me and had relevance for me. I got caught in this whole fascination of their conflicts and started to learn about this drama that would come alive in our board meetings. And I would be totally obsessed trying to figure out the patterns that we would get stuck in. I started to see that certain responses helped and certain ones didn't. So I started to experiment and try to generate these positive responses. I didn't really know what I was doing at that moment, but I was so fascinated. I decided to do my research on it, and which I think is really revolutionary. And I did it because I felt so helpless, and not just as a board member, but I remember working as an HR manager or a CFO or a VP, seeing how much time was wasted in conflicts and how many people we have lost and talent we have lost because of not knowing how to deal with this in meetings and after meetings, which we really didn't have any progress. So the framework and interventions that I was bringing in based on attachment and trying with teams were purely amazing and revolutionary. And I remember thinking to myself, what is this about work relationships that get people so worked up in these conflicts? And I remember heard myself say, don't be silly, it's all about emotional bond. And the whole thing of John Bowlby's amazing attachment science, which has grown massively since then and applied to adults, and now has hundreds of studies, suddenly made sense to me. John Bowlby's attachment theory is the best human developmental personality theory we have. But the most important aspect of it is that it is relational. It puts us in a relational context. It says we are bonding social human beings. And if we don't understand that, we don't understand anything. If a team is having a conflict and we take them out of that relational context, then of course their behavior will start to look weird. Of course it would. It would be like taking a fish out of water. It looks weird. But what we don't realize is that the water for us, where we can function, is our relationships, especially with people we depend on. So I started to remember all of John Bowlby's work, and I started to try the concepts of attachment and apply them to team relationships. And things started to change. I started to write about it. Well, that was frustration in itself. People didn't want to hear about emotional bonds in the workplace. And besides, everybody knew that adults were supposed to be differentiated, self-sufficient, independent. Well, I thought to myself, no, I don't think so. No. People who work together really depend on each other. And they impact each other so much. Because of that dependency, our brain seeks attachment automatically and turns on our bonding needs. This is wired into our nervous system. And it is clear from the day we are born. So ignoring the need for attachment, I knew that was wrong. But it was very difficult because nobody really wanted to accept that reality. People would say things like, we don't understand emotion. And I would say, excuse me, but I think we do. This is what emotion is all about. This is why it's so important, and this is why we should focus on emotion when people get into conflict. Well, they would say, like, go away. But when you know you've got something good, and you know that it is right, because you are seeing it working, and you keep doing it with teams, and you keep doing it with relationships, and having these amazing results, you know that this is the right approach, and it works. So how can it not? We're really addressing the key relationship need of human being, and that's really incredible. The bottom line is, what John Bowlby, the father of attachment science, said is that Freud was wrong. The most important powerful instincts in man are not aggression and power, it is the need for connection. If you think about it, as human beings, we are most vulnerable and frail for the longest time. It is wired into our nervous system, this need for connection with people we depend on, and be able to call on them, and they will come because they care about you, because they understand your need, is the most basic human reality there is. So attachment science first focused on mothers and children, but then researchers realized, wait a minute, this isn't just for mothers and children. It goes from the cradle to the grave. This applies to adults as well, especially those who depend on each other, like team relationships. So think about your own experience. You go to work and feel confident and secure, and then something happens. And suddenly you say, like, oh my gosh, this person has an impact on me. I just got hurt. I feel so vulnerable in this moment. That vulnerability often kicks in, and often we don't have many ways of dealing with it. Usually we go back to the way we learned it from long ago, and it's really tricky. We can get stuck in it. We need a safe haven that we can go to when we feel vulnerable. We need a secure base to go out from into the world. So because if you know someone got your back, it's easier to take risks. No matter how confident you feel, we need that connection. The connection you have with team members is what really matters in those moments. And this is a basic reality of human beings. The need for connection is wired into our survival code. So I invite you to think about, who do you go to as a key attachment figures? Who do you rely on? When we create a secure attachment with people we depend on, we carry them in our minds. And suddenly, when we feel vulnerable, we can go back to that memory and know that we are not alone. When we are scared, upset, or off balance, we can deal with that vulnerability because we have that source of comfort and support. And we know that what creates that secure bond. Team relationships are no longer a mystery anymore. From thousands of studies, we know that what creates a secure bond is when people come together on an emotional level, not by just sharing information like content. Computers can't do that. In fact, conflict lives in content. Conflict resolution comes out of emotional connection. Coming together on an emotional level means being emotionally open and responsive to the cues, and staying engaged with each other emotionally, making space, slowing things down, tending to each other's emotional experiences. So when you watch teams move from being blaming, which is, why don't you ever talk to me? Well, because you're so difficult to talk to, right? Into, I do get angry with you. I do criticize you because I'm desperately trying to connect with you. I'm desperately trying to talk with you. And it feels like I want to know that this matters to you. The other person can say, like, what? This is new, right? That's new emotional music. That's a new language. What? Wow, you just desperately want to try to connect with me? I'm that important to you? That type of conversation starts to shift everything. If it shifts the music, it shifts the dance between your team members. And then the other person starts to learn how to say, I do shut you out. I do. I shut you out. Not because you don't matter to me, but because you matter so much. And I can't bear to hear that I'm disappointing you. It scares me. I can't bear it. It's overwhelming, so I shut down. But of course, the tricky part is the more one shuts down, the more the other gets angry and upset and gets more, they push to criticize. So the more they push and criticize, the more rejected the other person feels and the more they shut down. That's the cycle. That's the cycle that consumes a lot of team relationships and causes all kinds of distress. It's about time that we figure this out and understand what is actually happening in relationships. It's really the key to shifting the team from being stuck to moving on. And now we do know how to do that. We know how to help people to create that secure bond. This is not just my opinion or I'm stating some sort of proposal to you. This is research. 15 years of research studies have really shown that we know how to shift team cultures, team relationships. We know how to, not just to make people feel happy, but to know how to create those stronger bonds that last, which is have a real emotional engagement. That is how you make a difference. So all the research says that people have the best collaboration and most thrilling conversations when their team members are happy and connected. Well, of course they do. If I'm safe with you, that doesn't shut me down. It turns me up. If I'm safe with you, I can play. I can share my opinions freely. I can take risks with you. I can tell you what I think. My crazy ideas and suggestions are not going to be rejected, but allowed. And we can play together. We can dance, and every time we dance together, it's different and it's fascinating. I think this is healthy. This is productive. This is engaging. And the thing about it is that healthy relationships equal healthy employees, healthy people, healthy teams, healthy cultures. The people who have secure connections with others are the strongest mentally, emotionally, physically, and cognitively. They are most resilient. There is so much data on this now. So denying your vulnerability is not strength. We all know that on some level. Strength is knowing who you are. So having a secure connection with yourself, being able to accept your emotions, knowing when you become vulnerable and being able to deal with those emotions and reach for people when you need them in a way that pulls them close, that's strength. That is a real strength. And one thing I love about working with teams is that when you help them to have these bonding conversations, not only does their relationship changes, the people change. They become less depressed, less anxious, more confident, and more sure of themselves. They feel more worthy and valued. And of course they do, because they can turn to each other and say, I'm anxious right now. And the other person can say, it's okay. You can do this. I've got your back. I'm right here with you. And there's a great study, actually, of young career women. Those women who had a secure bond with their boss and peers, which is not the same as happy, but it was a secure on a deeper emotional level. Those women were more confident in their jobs. They took more risks. They got further in their career. They felt better about themselves. Even if they failed, they recovered faster. So we are not wired really to be emotionally alone. And what I just said is hugely significant, because creating an environment where people can thrive is really the key to keeping those people. So if you want people to stay in your company, educate them about relationship is the answer. Teaching them how to repair the rifts is the answer. Paying attention to disconnections and knowing how to pay attention to the disconnections is the answer. Giving people tools how to reconnect and repair those rifts is empowering and gives them a roadmap to resilience. Good relationships are detrimental to our mental health, emotional health, physical health, and our cognitive functioning. When we feel a sense of connection, when we know how to turn toward each other, make eye contact, and share the most vulnerable feelings underneath the perceived conflict, we can only then wonder and look under. Okay, I'm going to say that again because I love that. When we can share our vulnerable feelings underneath the perceived conflict, we can wonder and look under. It's like there's so much underneath. That is what bonding conversation is all about. It's sharing our vulnerability, it's sharing your needs, it's sharing your fears, and reaching out to the people you depend on to help you with those vulnerabilities. And this is a life-changing event for most people. It brings that human frailty right into the present. When people start to talk on an emotionally connected level, they start to share how perpetually terrified they feel about doing or saying something wrong to each other. Just think about it. Perpetually terrified. And that they can't really share with each other because they don't know how to have these conversations. And when they are able to do that, when they learn the language of emotions and able to really articulate that devastating experience, it really changes them. They come together. They can start risking more and creating more corrective emotional experiences. Because, of course, I'm interested in what happens in these team relationships, because the more people create secure attachment, and we know how to facilitate that, every single positive response that you have in terms of mental and physical health, it just does. So there are all kinds of research about that. If you want a source of resilience, the best source of resilience in human beings is whether they have a secure connection with people they depend on. There was a great research study after 9/11. Research looked at the companies that were in the vicinity of 9/11 attack. And those companies that created support groups where people could share their fears, their vulnerability with each other, they could turn to each other and confide to get that comfort and support, were doing a lot better. People months and months later were doing fine. The people who were not part of those groups, who were not able to turn to each other, who had no relationships, and who said, I'm not scared, I'm not stressed, I'm not overwhelmed, I don't need this, I don't need to be here with you. Those people had a lot of problems. They could not even do their tasks. They got depressed. They got isolated and alone. So the big question in the relationship is, are you there for me? Are you accessible to me? Are you responsive to me? Are you engaged with me? And being there doesn't mean that you have to come up with 5 ways to deal with my stress or come up with a perfect answer to my problem. And I think this is where people get caught in, right? They get caught in figuring out how to help you. But you don't have to do that. You don't have to have the perfect answer. You just have to be there, like a mother with a child. The child can survive being upset. The child can survive seeing a big dog and being scared of the dog, as long as the mother is there. And if you listen to the way the mother talks to children, it's how the people talk in bonding conversations. It's like the mother doesn't talk to the child high and fast. right? The way I'm talking to you right now, which is about information. Like, listen to me, da, 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 right? I'm talking to your prefrontal cortex. Mothers talk to the amygdala, to the emotional part of the brain. So if you listen to people when they are bonding, their voices are soft, they go slow and low. It's kind of like they're talking at that emotional channel. They're talking to each other's amygdala. They're making an emotional connection. In human beings, we are vulnerable for so long. We have so much need for connection. We don't understand that this need goes from the cradle to the grave. We always have this need, even in our work relationships. So when teams learn how to have these bonding conversations, they can learn how to move forward when they get disconnected, how to repair the disconnect, and how to learn to create those secure attachment. So the teams that learn how to move forward in deepening their sense of attachment with each other have these kind of bonding conversations where they can share emotionally and vulnerably about what's really there, what they need, and they know that when the person shares, it's not about giving advice. It's about meeting people emotionally at a deeper level. It gives them the message, I'm here, whatever it is, we're totally doing this together. It's the kind of conversation that connects people at a basic human level. And I think one of the things that Bowlby said all those years ago, and people like James Gross, who talks about the sense of emotional aloneness, not just being able to be alone in the world, but having a sense of emotional aloneness, not mattering to another human being, is disastrous for us. Bowlby basically said human beings can't tolerate it. They're not wired for it. They can't tolerate it. So if you put a human being in that situation, they'll dash out and they'll try to find an escape, something to take them out of that space. Because emotional connection with others is our main survival script as human beings. And not having that connection, our human brains knows that this is dangerous for us. This is not viable for our survival. I like to say that in our EMC training programs, we have really cracked the code to workplace conflict, to team dynamics, and provide a roadmap for teams and leaders to know how to strengthen and nurture their relationship bonds so that people build a connected culture, so they can be there for each other, so no one really feels alone and isolated. If you can hurt each other and wound each other and come back and find ways to repair and reconnect, which you can accomplish anything. You can deal with anything. So the way we get this is through stronger, deeper connections. The secure relationships really allows us to have the space and the independence we need to create confidence, even more independence and more ease to express our needs on what works or what doesn't work, because our teammates and our managers' relationships are so important to us. We want them to be there for us and hear it so much more readily, and we'll feel relaxed knowing that we are connected through all of it. You can learn all of this in our training programs and learn the steps to how to create secure bonding conversations where you can create secure attachment. This is a message of hope. I want you to know that having strong, lasting relationships with your team will create more productivity, motivation, creativity. If you want to improve retention, there's a science to it. We have cracked the code, and these are evidence-based theories and practices. And we have an abundance of resources on our website, emcleaders.com. For us, the definition of a thriving culture is where you are accessible, responsive, and engaged with each other, especially when it matters. When you create a safety for you to play together, experiment, grow together, and take risks, that is a thriving culture. A thriving relationship is where you and each of your team members feel safe and supported. And you start to help each other explore and learn and grow together. Be sure to check out our books, The Emotional Connection and the Connected Culture, our training courses, and our website. We are here for you to learn and be emotionally connected. If you like this webinar, please be sure to give us thumbs up and share this webinar with your teams so they can learn the importance of secure attachment. Thank you so much for being here, and I can't wait to see you next time.